Hi everybody, so I have just finished playing the Resident Evil 3 Remake, and in this video I'm going to be answering the question, is it worth buying cheap? Because I picked it up as part of the Raccoon City edition, where you get Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 3 Remake. I think it was for about £12, so £6 for each of those games was pretty good. And of course, I've got to say straight away, yes, it is absolutely worth buying cheap, because the beautiful thing about these remakes, and remember we're talking about Resident Evil 3 here, I'll do a separate video for Resident Evil 2, is I think it's the sheer atmosphere that these games have, these early Resident Evil games, where you're in Raccoon City, you're making your way through, you know, alleyways and subways and the city streets, and it just, the sound is great. The feelings are great, the ambiance is absolutely fantastic, the sound is so good, and you have these beautifully rendered surroundings. You know, when you think back to, if you played the original games, like I remember playing the original Resident Evil 2 actually on an N64, and then I guess I played Resident Evil 3 probably on a PS2 using backwards compatibility, just marvelling at the graphics. You know, and back then it was just fixed camera positions, but how amazing these locations looked. In fact, back in those days with the fixed camera stuff, the characters didn't look that good, but the rooms and the streets you were moving through looked amazing, and this kind of brings that together. You've got a pretty interesting story with Resident Evil 3. It's quite nice rediscovering lots of things about the Outbreak and Umbrella and the nasty people and the people fighting them. But remember, the original was called Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, and really this game is Nemesis versus Jill Valentine. In fact, one of the funniest jokes is at the end when she says something about these continuous fights she has to keep having with this Nemesis who keeps catching up with her. Now, Resident Evil 3 is a little bit more action orientated than Resident Evil 2, and you can put it in easy mode, or I think they call it assisted mode, where they give you the assault rifle straight away, and you have a bit more inventory space, and I think you recover health better, and you get more ammo when you craft ammunition. And I don't think there's anything wrong with playing it in that mode as well, and enjoying it in that mode. Remember, you know, as you go through the story and then you finish it and you think, all right, I could have done this, this and this. And once you've finished it, you then have the option to go in, and if you complete challenges, you get points to take different things into the game as well. So you can go back and you could play it on the harder levels as well. But I think the spirit of the original games, as far as I remember them, I'm getting those vibes from Resident Evil 3. Some of the criticisms apparently that Resident Evil 3 had was that it's quite short, but I think it took me about 8 hours to work my way through. And I had it on normal right up until the end. It was only until one of the last boss fights that I was like, oh, I've got to put it on easy mode, because I just couldn't kill one of the bosses. And so I think there's nothing wrong with that. Also, I'd say I got Resident Evil 2 Remake on the PlayStation 4, and I kind of remember playing it and I remember playing it and thinking, this looks really good. But now playing the PC version of Resident Evil 3, although it looks really good, it does look slightly muddy. You know, it doesn't look sharp. So if you've played Cyberpunk 2077, for example, on a decent PC, you know, how sharp it looks. The pre-rendered backgrounds, well, I guess they're not pre-rendered, they're rendered as you're going along, because they're 3D, aren't they? They look great, but you can kind of tell that there's probably going to be a Resident Evil 3 Remake remastered at some point for 4K, I would have thought, and later machines. And especially things like the zombies. Their faces don't always have that much detail. Now, I'm not saying that spoils the game at all, because once you've been playing it for a bit, you kind of get used to it. And of course, although this is now 3D, the movement is still clunky, you know. And what that means is it's really the boss battles that are frustrating, when you're normally in an arena and you've got to try and avoid these attacks and shoot at the shoot at the enemy and then reload and or do all this sort of stuff. And with the basic movement mechanics you have, that can be a little bit frustrating. There's also things like there's no photo mode in it, which is a little bit odd as well. But I've got to say, despite all that, I've had a great time with the Resident Evil 3 remake, and I would definitely recommend you check it out. If you haven't checked out any of the Resident Evil remakes or any of the Resident Evil games at all, this might be a good one to start off with, because it's not that long. As I say, you can play in assisted mode where you do get an assault rifle straight away. It is a little bit more action orientated, so there's more shooting, zombies in the head rather than finding lots of puzzles that you have to solve. And so I think it will really whet your appetite for some of the other titles in the series as well. So there we go. Resident Evil 3 Remake, definitely worth buying cheap. Definitely worth buying cheap. I've enjoyed it. Looking forward to replaying Resident Evil 2 Remake, and of course, the Resident Evil 4 Remake is coming in 2023, isn't it? Anyway, what do you think? Put your questions and comments down below, and I'll see you again soon.